The hyper-focus on growing tobacco and the high death rate of colonists meant that there was a serious shortage of labor. The Virginia Company was in a desperate process to try to alleviate this labor shortage. So, Virginia was not only an unpleasant place, it was a place that was kind of tense and stressful because you're always worried about were you going to find labor? How are you going to grow more tobacco? How are you going to get more land? It was all people ever worried about. The Virginia Company did try to implement several reforms to make Virginia a better place. To address the labor shortage, the company initiated the headright system in 1618 to encourage the importation of servants. The headright system made the importation of servants essentially free for masters. All the master had to do was pay for the passage from England to Virginia for however many servants he wanted. The contracts would cost nothing more than that initial passage fee. Also, the company would deed an extra 50 acres to the master per each head he brought over. So the freedom dues would be revenue neutral for him. All that accomplished was to increase the master's motivation to find ways to work his servants to death. The master could not kill his servants. Murder was illegal and would result in execution. What a master could do, though, would be to send a servant in year 6 or 7 to his swampy, mosquito-infected land and hope that he caught malaria or some other horrible disease. Also, he could reduce the servant's rations or send him on errands into territory known to contain dangerous Native Americans, among other creative methods to kill people without murdering them. By the late 1650s, however, servants began to catch on to this, and they survived in greater numbers and had to be given land. That land was typically as far away from rivers as possible and often close to native-held territory, which was dangerous. In an attempt to increase the population's involvement and stake in Virginia society, the Virginia Company instituted the first representative legislative assembly in North America, which was called the House of Burgesses. It was not really representative, though. There were strict land qualifications on who could hold office and who could vote for office holders. The poor farmers, those former servants, rarely gained enough land to qualify. So, for the most part, the wealthy landowners dominated the House of Burgesses and wrote laws that benefited them. Only one or two seats typically represented the entire population of poorer farmers, which made up the plurality of the Virginia population. The rest of the House of Burgesses represented the interests of the wealthy and the well-connected. Sounds kind of like our politics. It was, however, an elected legislative assembly, which was unique for the time, and it was somewhat more inclusive than the English Parliament, in that many of these wealthy planters in Virginia, or what were called the grandees, they were not members of the richest houses of England. So in England, these people who made up the well-connected burgesses in Virginia, those people would not have been the English elite. In Virginia, they were the elite, though. This is an image, artist rendering of the House of Burgesses. Relations with the natives were always tense from the beginning of settlement. However, despite some skirmishes and small conflicts, Powhatan maintained an uneasy truce with the English. He allowed them to settle, tolerated their operations, and allowed the English to expand their lands. However, Powhatan died in 1618. His younger brother, a Native American named Opechancanough, became the new Rarowentz, or sachem, or chief of the Powhatan Confederacy. Opechancanough was one of the few natives to truly understand early on what English settlement meant for his people. He understood that this was not a friendly relationship, that the English meant to acquire as much land as possible, and eventually that would mean that his people either had to acquiesce to that or be destroyed. He abandoned diplomacy and probably in 1621 started to plan an effort to drive the English out. Understanding the importance the English placed on Christianity, Opechancanough initiated simultaneous and massive surprise attacks on Good Friday against almost all the English settlements in Virginia. This became known as the Indian Massacre of 1622. The attack succeeded in killing about 400 colonists, more than a third of the English population, which was about 1,100 in that year. Now, to Opechancanough, that success would have seemed like enough. In native warfare, they focused on tests of strength and skill. When one tribe bested another, the other tribe would admit defeat and withdraw. Opechancanough probably thought that the English would voluntarily withdraw from Virginia because they were so humiliated in that initial surprise attack that killed a third of their people. However, this was not the European method of warfare. The European method was to lay siege and force the enemy to surrender by starving them out. You didn't admit defeat until the other side gave up. The Virginia colonists regrouped and they sent their militias into every Indian village they found, burning them to the ground, killing everyone there, women and children, whoever they found, and most importantly, burning any corn crops they found. Natives were not used to this type of kind of total warfare, so eventually they sued for peace, but that wasn't the end of it. Powhatan tradition was to discuss peace in large gatherings, including both sides' best warriors, to show respect. Opechancanough, in these peace negotiations, brought with him several hundred of his best warriors to discuss a peace treaty. An English doctor and the governor of the colony, a man named John Potts, he poisoned the drinks offered to the Algonquian warriors, killing over 200 of them. Opechancanough himself got sick, but was able to escape. But his forces were severely weakened as a result of that poisoning. Later in his life, in 1644, Opechancanough attempted a similar uprising, which had similar results. It was a multi-pronged surprise attack that killed about 400 colonists. The problem was that by 1644, 22 years later, after the first attack, Virginia colony had grown to about 40,000 colonists. So killing 400 out of 40,000 isn't quite as big a deal as killing 400 out of 1,100. Opechancanough was captured in the second attack. He was beheaded and his head displayed in Jamestown for years afterward. By 1670, the Powhatan Indians in the region, who had once numbered an estimated 20,000, numbered around 2,000. Study this image for a moment. This was the image that circulated around England following the 1622 attack. There's a discussion question related to this image.